Something unbelievable is happening right now, and almost no one is talking about it the way they should be. Imagine a country that was once overshadowed by its bigger neighbors suddenly becoming one of the most talked about places on social media, in investment circles, among world travelers, and yes, even in American households that usually only care about the usual global hotspots. What if I told you that this place has quietly rewritten its own story in a way that feels like a movie, and Americans can't seem to stop watching, sharing, and debating about it every single day? This isn't hype, this is real, and by the end of this video you'll see why Malaysia has become the surprise sensation of 2026, a country that's gone from being a nice destination to a global phenomenon that has captured the imagination of people from coast to coast. For years, Malaysia was known for beautiful beaches, diverse cultures, spicy food, and maybe a couple of travel articles here and there, but in 2026, it's suddenly everywhere. What changed? Why are Americans, from tech founders in Silicon Valley to students in New York City cafes, constantly talking about Malaysia as if it's the next big thing in business, lifestyle, travel, and even social culture? The stories go beyond travel vlogs and vacation photos. They involve real shifts in economics, quality of life, digital innovation, and something deeper that connects with a generation that's hungry for meaning and opportunity. Today we're going to unpack the whole story, what happened, why it matters, and where this all might be headed next. First, Malaysia's rise didn't happen overnight. If you looked back a decade ago, you'd see a country with potential, natural beauty, strategic location, multilingual people. But it was often overlooked compared to giants like Singapore, Japan, or South Korea. The narrative outside Southeast Asia was simple: Malaysia is nice to visit, but not exactly where global headlines are made. The turning point came in a way that nobody saw coming. It wasn't a single event, like a sudden discovery or a big international scandal. Instead, it was a gradual gathering of forces: economic policy shifts, tech investment surges, social changes, and a cultural renaissance that all started to align. The first ripple that Americans noticed wasn't even about business or GDP growth. It was a wave of personal stories. Digital nomads, creatives, and entrepreneurs who moved to Malaysia and started sharing how affordable, vibrant, and inspiring life had become. These were not polished marketing campaigns, they were authentic, unfiltered narratives that suddenly started trending on platforms Americans pay attention to. What made these personal stories hit so differently was the contrast they created. At a time when living costs in major U.S. cities were skyrocketing and burnout was everywhere, Malaysia appeared as an alternative, a place where you could have strong internet, modern amenities, great food, low costs, beautiful landscapes, and a peaceful lifestyle all in one package. Suddenly, endless threads on Facebook groups, Reddit boards, and TikTok videos began to appear. I moved to Malaysia and here's what changed, why this city is better than my old life, best kept secret for remote work. And that's when curiosity turned into conversation, but it didn't stop at lifestyle content. As more Americans visited Malaysia and shared their experiences, journalists and analysts started to pay attention. Reports began labeling Malaysia as an emerging cultural hub, Southeast Asia's rising economy, and the new destination for innovators. Financial publications wrote about surging investments in Malaysian tech startups, significant foreign partnerships, and the rapid expansion of digital infrastructure that outpaced expectations. Suddenly, Malaysia wasn't just a cool travel story, it was a story about growth, potential, and real opportunity. What's fascinating is how these narratives converged. The economic talk wasn't cold or distant, it was tied to human stories that people could relate to. An American founder in Kuala Lumpur might share how easy it was to scale a business with a lower runway, how supportive local communities were, or how collaborating across borders felt exciting instead of exhausting. Meanwhile, remote workers were posting pictures of coastlines after work hours, talking about weekends deep inside rainforests, and comparing that life to their former grind in expensive U.S. cities. These weren't just postcards, they were persuasive testimonials. As these narratives multiplied, something contagious happened: Americans started imagining new possibilities for themselves. It wasn't just about a vacation anymore, it became about transformation. Viewers began saying, if that's possible for them, what could it mean for me? And that question turned into search trends, travel bookings, inquiries about work visas, and more conversation. The more people talked about creative entrepreneurship and lifestyle freedom in Malaysia, the more the conversation spread into mainstream American circles, slipping out of niche communities and into everyday discussions. One of the most surprising shifts was how Malaysia stepped into the spotlight not by copying Western models, but by embracing its own identity. Travelers and expats weren't just impressed by convenience, they were captivated by the fusion of cultures, the food, the language diversity, and a sense of community that felt rare elsewhere. Americans were suddenly talking about things like Malaysian food markets, night bazaars, cultural festivals, and multi-ethnic harmony. Things that aren't just cool travel moments, but deep human connections. That's an emotional component most economic stories lack, and it made the narrative resonate on a personal level. Of course, none of this would explode without some structural changes behind the scenes. Malaysia's government started to modernize policies that encouraged foreign investment, eased digital nomad visas, and supported innovation hubs in major cities. Tech conferences that once felt regional began attracting global players. International partnerships flourished in sectors like fintech, green tech, and e-commerce. And while policy shifts alone don't make headlines, when combined with trending personal stories they started shaping a bigger picture, one that Americans found exciting and worthy of attention. The more people learned about Malaysia, the deeper the conversations got. It wasn't just, look how beautiful this place is, but, look how this place is building a future. Influencers began collaborating with local talents, co-creating content that introduced global audiences to uniquely Malaysian perspectives on art, music, and innovation. Documentaries and podcasts started featuring Malaysian voices, and suddenly the narrative wasn't top-down or exoticized, it was nuanced, relatable, and real. Americans weren't just watching passively, they were engaging, asking questions, planning trips, and even considering relocation. What's also remarkable is how Malaysia became a benchmark for a broader shift in how people think about life choices. During a time when many Americans were questioning traditional paths, questioning whether bigger is always better, whether high cost of living is worth it, and whether personal fulfillment matters more than prestige, Malaysia emerged as a symbol of possibility. It wasn't the only place people looked to, but it became one of the clearest examples of a country that seemed to offer both quality of life and growth opportunities. Some critics tried to dismiss the buzz as just a travel trend, another cycle of social media fascination that would fade.